Hello, everyone. So as always, I will start with a brief introduction. My name is Dora. I'm one of the organizers of Kesher, and you can also find here Sebastian, and we are the both of us running these events in which we share Jewish history, Jewish culture, and Jewish heritage talks from all over the world. Today is a bit of a unique, special event. It's not like the others. We usually focus on one city or one country's Jewish heritage. Today, we're going to focus on a full region. And of course, that's very difficult to share in such a short time the history of the Balkans. But we know that Joseph is going to do an amazing job. And the reason why we're also focusing a bit more on the whole region and not just in one place is because we will also learn today about the real life trips that Joseph takes to the Balkans in different countries in the summer. So after a historical presentation, which will be around 45, 50 minutes. He will also share with us a bit of a virtual tour in which he will share with us about the real life tours. So today you can find out both virtually and also about real life events. And we're very happy to welcome Joseph Benatov, who is originally from Bulgaria, and he's part of Sophia's Jewish community. He has a PhD in comparative literature from the University of Pennsylvania, where he teaches Hebrew. And every summer he takes groups to the Balkans. So welcome, Joseph. I'll pass the word to you. And if there are any questions, please put them in the chat and we'll try to answer as many as possible during and after the presentation.
Thank you, Dora. Thank you, Sebastian. Good afternoon to everyone. Good evening for those of you in Europe. I'm very happy to see so many people on the call, and I'm humbled by your interest. As Dora mentioned, I will try to do a combined presentation and then separate it at least nominally in two parts. And I do have a PowerPoint to guide us along. So let me put it up. Can you see my first slide? Yeah. Okay, wonderful. I want to take us very briefly through some of the historical highlights of Jewish presence on the Balkans and in the general region. Partly, as Dora mentioned, because we also focus on Jewish heritage trips in various communities around the same area. And this is what I'd like to speak about in the second half of our talk. This is our official outfit, and we'll return to it in the second half. I'm showing initially a slide of the different countries that we visit so that you get an initial sense of what we want to focus on historically, obviously very briefly, because it's a large variety of countries and communities in the region. A map to get us started, a present-day look of the Balkan Peninsula and the different countries and nation states that are located in this geographic region. Another map, more focused on the western part of the Balkans. Now, when we speak of Jewish presence and when we try to historicize the different communities in the Balkans, chronologically, the earliest and oldest Jewish communities to have resided in the region are the Romaniot Jews, the Jews of the Roman Empire. And this is where their name comes from, the Romaniot Jews. We have evidence of such organized communities dating back all the way to the first century of the current era, some places even a little bit earlier than that. This example is from present-day Bulgaria on the southern banks of the Danube around a town called Gigen, or a village called Gigen. In the Roman Empire, this was the Ulpia Escus fortress. Other Romaniot communities from roughly the same period, anywhere between the first to the fourth century of the current era, existed, for example, in the second largest city in Bulgaria today, Plovdiv. Um, in archaeological digs, the ruins of a Romaniot synagogue were discovered, and you see the mosaic floor, which is well preserved and exhibited in the archaeological museum in the town of Plovdiv in Bulgaria. This example comes from North Macedonia, a town or a settlement called Stobi, where once again a Romaniot, the remains of a Romaniot synagogue were discovered. This example is from Ioannina or Yanina in Greece. Very interestingly, the community remained distinctly Romaniot well into the modern era, unlike other places where Romaniot Jews sort of intermingled with other communities, and especially with the Sephardic majority. Following historically the earliest presence of Romaniot Jews, the next group of Jews to have arrived in the region were the Ashkenazi Jews, and we have evidence of Ashkenazi Jews coming from areas in Hungary in the 1370s, from areas in Bavaria about 100 years later in the 1470s or so. This example is from the town of Nikopol on the Danube in present-day Bulgaria, where Ashkenazi Jews arrived during both of these waves in the 14th century and in the mid or second half of the 15th century. In order to understand the history and the composition of Jewish communities in the region, it's important to keep in mind the imperial framework, because it was indeed the different empires that ruled the region which determined the makeup, the numbers, and the location of different Jewish groups. One very important empire was the Habsburg monarchy, the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Of course, side by side with the Austro-Hungarian Empire, its arch enemy, in a sense, was the Ottoman Empire. And if we speak of Jewish presence, it's fairly accurate to say that in areas controlled by the Ottoman Empire, the majority in terms of Jewish numbers were the Sephardic Jews, obviously following the expulsion from the Iberian Peninsula, whereas in the Habsburg lands, in Austro-Hungarian lands, the majority was Ashkenazi. But as borders changed and possession of lands changed, also the composition of these communities changed, which is the reason why in some of the urban centers there are mixed Jewish communities, Ashkenazi, Sephardic, and Romaniot. And this is true both of Austro-Hungarian lands and of Ottoman lands. We mentioned the expulsion from the Iberian Peninsula. Indeed, the turning point in terms of the Jewish history of the Balkans was the late 15th century, 1492 and 1497, when the Jews of Spain and Portugal were expelled. And as you see on this map, many of the so-called Eastern Sephardic Jews, the Eastern Sephardim, traveled through the Mediterranean basin, and a large number of those Sephardic Jews settled in the Ottoman Empire, establishing for the first time sizable Sephardic congregations in the various urban centers of the Ottoman Empire. Estimates range anywhere between 60,000 to about 100 or maybe even 120,000 Sephardic Jews who arrived over the course of 4 decades or so, starting with the expulsion. One prominent rabbi from this early arrival of Sephardic Jews was Rabbi Yosef Karo, the author famously of Shulchan Aruch, of the Jewish Code of Law, who lived for a period in that same town of Nikopol that I mentioned, where he established a yeshiva and started work on his monumental work, Beit Yosef, which then was abridged into Shulchan Aruch. I mentioned that in many of those metropolitan centers, there was a mixture, sort of a mosaic of Jewish communities because of the meeting point of empires. Sarajevo is an excellent example where historically the dominant majority of the Jewish community was Sephardic. However, after 1878, once Sarajevo and Bosnia changed hands and became part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, significant numbers of Ashkenazi Jews arrived and settled in Sarajevo, so it became a combined city with both Ashkenazi and Sephardic communities. Another very similar example is Belgrade in present-day Serbia, the capital of present-day Serbia, where both Ashkenazi and Sephardic communities lived and coexisted. And what you can see here, a very sort of telling example, are the two cemeteries, the Ashkenazi and Sephardic cemeteries, which are across the street from each other in Belgrade. Zagreb, another such example, Croatia's capital, historically, primarily Ashkenazi Jews lived and populated Zagreb. However, after 1878, some Sephardic Jews moved some of them from Sarajevo, arrived in Zagreb, since this was now all Austro-Hungarian territory, and established a small Sephardic community. Salonika or Thessaloniki in northern Greece, in many ways the most important Jewish urban center in the whole region of southeastern Europe. Salonika was primarily a Sephardic center. However, both Romaniot and Ashkenazi communities also existed and lived in Thessaloniki all the way into the 20th century. Another interesting phenomenon that has to do with the imperial history of the region, and specifically with the Austro-Hungarian period in Central Europe and Southeastern Europe, was the so-called schism that took place in Hungarian Jewry. And this event happened, between 1869 and 1871, ultimately resulting in a very dramatic and serious split amongst Hungarian Jewry, as a result of which three distinct and warring, we may say, communities were formed: the Orthodox community, the Neolog community. These were the breakaway, liberal, modern-minded Jews who established, their own community, and they were named the Neolog Jews. And then a third group of Hungarian Jewry who refused to side with either of the two camps were the so-called status quo ante. So it's unique to the Austro-Hungarian Empire that after 1871, three distinct groups of Ashkenazi Jews coexisted in most of the large centers of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and this includes present-day Romania as well. This is an example of a gorgeous neo-log synagogue, which we visit on our tour in Szeged, in Hungary. And this is an example of that middle-of-the-road group, the status quo ante Jews who remained, in a sense, unaffiliated with either of these two uh, ends of the spectrum in Hungarian Jewish life. This status quo ante synagogue is from the town of Târgu in Romania, another stop on our tour of Romania, Serbia, and Szeged in Hungary. Another very groundbreaking event that shaped Jewish life significantly in the Balkans, both in the Ottoman Empire and well beyond. It had effects well beyond the realms of the Ottoman Empire, was the Shabtai Tzvi affair. The Shabtai Tzvi affair took place in the second half of the 17th century. Shabtai Tzvi was an was a Romaniot Jew, actually. Most people think he's Sephardic, but he was actually a Romaniot Jew born in the Ottoman Empire in the town of Izmir. At the age of 24 or so, he proclaimed himself the Messiah. And he was urged to do that by his right-hand man, Nathan of Gaza, whom you see on the right, a young rabbi whom Shabtai Tzvi met as he was touring the Holy Land. Now, Shabtai Tzvi claimed that 1666 would be the prophetic year of the Second Coming, and he had an extremely massive following amongst the Sephardic Jews of the Ottoman Empire, especially in Thessaloniki, also in his hometown Izmir, and in communities across the Ottoman Empire and further west in Europe. In 1666, ultimately, the Ottoman authorities arrested Shabtai Tzvi since they realized that something momentous was happening and it was shaking up the sort of the economic and daily life in the cities of the Ottoman Empire. Shabtai Tzvi was arrested and given an ultimatum where he either had to convert to Islam or otherwise he would be killed. And given this choice, Shabtai Tzvi quickly agreed to convert to Islam, which of course dealt an enormous blow to Sephardic and other communities across the region who realized that he was actually a false messiah. However, one smaller group of followers kept believing in Shabtai Tzvi and also converted to Islam, forming the so-called Muslim group of Jewish converts known as the Donme or the Ma'aminim. Another image of Shabtai Tzvi and Nathan of Gaza, and kind of the turmoil that was caused, especially in 1666. The last years of his life, following his conversion to Islam, Shabtai Tzvi spent in an Albanian coastal town, which is now in Montenegro, the town of Ulcin, where he was imprisoned or semi-imprisoned in the Ulcin fortress that you see in front of you. And he spent the last 3.5 years of his life there and died in 1676. on Yom Kippur, actually, in 1676. His tomb, the location of his tomb, became somewhat of a mystery into up to the present day, and one possible location of the tomb, probably, most probably, the correct historical assumption is that tomb that you see in front of you, housed inside the private home of a local Muslim family in the town of Ulcin. Uh, and we visit there, we visit this town on our tour of Montenegro, Albania, and Corfu. And the picture on your right, I took myself this summer when we were in town. You know, the house was closed. This family is very private in its guarding and keeping of the grave, but I kind of was able to take that photo through the window. Now, a corollary of that Shabtai Tzvi affair uh, was the emergence of a new genre in Jewish literature, uh, namely the series of volumes known as Me'am Lo'ez. One Sephardic rabbi by the name of Yaakov Huli realized that in many ways the reason why the Sephardic Jews of the Ottoman Empire were so enamored by this charismatic figure of a false messiah was the fact that many of those communities were fairly ignorant and had lost command of Hebrew, had no direct access to the Hebrew Bible. So Yaakov Huli decided for the first time to um, to produce commentary on the Hebrew Bible in Ladino, in Judeo-Spanish, the vernacular language of the Sephardic Jews of the Balkans. Up to this point, it was unthinkable that the language, the daily language, Judeo-Spanish or Ladino, could be used for religious purposes or to write anything that had to do with holy texts. But Yaakov Huli, implemented a true revolutionary change, which whose effect was really the emergence of what is now Ladino literature. It started as a religious type of literature, and later on, especially in the 19th century, secular literature written in Ladino developed. But this set of volumes, or this series known as Me'am Lo'ez, became the absolute bestseller for decades to follow amongst the Ladino-speaking Jews of the Ottoman Empire. Speaking of Ladino, a very interesting moment that took place in the very late 19th century and early 20th century was in some ways the rediscovery of those lost Spanish citizens, those Sephardic Jews who had been expelled in the 15th century and had lived for centuries in the Ottoman Empire. Their rediscovery by a Spanish diplomat by the name of Ángel Pulido, who apparently, as he was traveling on a boat along the Danube, met by chance a Sephardic rabbi from the Balkans. This rabbi, Chaim Bejerano, he was a Bulgarian-born Sephardic rabbi, and they struck up a conversation, and Pulido was fascinated to hear a much older and, in his mind, much more beautiful version of Spanish that sounded like the writings of Cervantes, for example. And in this way, Ángel Pulido discovered and became a proponent for the Sephardic Jews of the Balkans amongst Spain and in political and diplomatic circles in Spain. Around the same moment, late 19th century, early 20th century, a somewhat related event or development was the invention of a new Sephardic holiday, we may call it, or a Sephardic celebration, which was the brainchild of an Izmir-born Sephardic intellectual and journalist and a philanthropist by the name of Aaron de Yosef Chazan, whom you see in front of you. His idea was that the Sephardic Jews of the Ottoman Empire in 1892, for the first time ever, should celebrate in a festive manner their expulsion from Spain 400 years earlier. The expulsion was in 1492. So Aaron Chazan proposed in his Ladino newspaper, whose editor he proposed that a series of festivities and celebrations should take place amongst the Sephardic Jews of the Ottoman Empire in 1892 to commemorate the 400th anniversary of the expulsion. The idea behind this festival was to show, in a way, allegiance for the Sephardic Jews of the Ottoman Empire, to show political allegiance to the empire and to present themselves as loyal citizens of the empire. And indeed, this was also the time, and as a result of kind of these discussions amongst Sephardic intellectuals, this is when the myth of the romantic, friendly embrace and welcome of the Sephardic Jews by the Ottoman Empire in 1492, this is when this myth was born as part of these intellectuals' desire to show their allegiance to the Ottoman Empire. Another Sephardic rabbi, this time of Bulgarian extraction, whom I want to mention, is Rabbi Gavriel Almoznino. Rabbi Gavriel Almoznino became very prominent in Bulgarian Jewish history in the year 1877, when he was able to save Bulgaria's future capital, Sofia, the city of Sofia, from a major fire, which the Ottoman authorities, the receding Ottoman authorities, as they were being defeated by the Russian army, they had decided to burn the city down. And the local ruler, Suleiman Pasha, informed representatives of the different communities in the city, including some diplomats, informed them what was about to take place, and Rabbi Gavriel Almoznino, together with members of the Jewish community, was able to they were able to put out the fire and save the city of Sofia from arson and from total destruction. The post-Ottoman period and the late 19th century, early 20th century, across the Balkans, was an interesting moment when the Jewish communities who were the former citizens and subjects of these empires, the Ottoman Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and so forth, this was the period when they gradually started forming a new national consciousness as they became now citizens of the newly emerged nation states, Bulgaria, Greece, Turkey, Yugoslavia, Romania, and so forth. So what we know today and what we think of today as these national Jewish communities, the Bulgarian Jewish community, the Bosnian, Serbian, Croat Jewish community, and so forth, these are relatively new historical concepts because for a much longer period, as I hope you saw, these same Jewish communities thought of themselves as the subjects of different empires, as the citizens of their metropolitan center where they lived, but not necessarily in nation state terms. During that same period, turn of the century, late 19th, early 20th century, one very prominent uh, ideological movement that caught roots and affected Jewish life across the region was the emergence of political Zionism. Zionism took stronghold in various communities across the region, but Bulgaria is a prime example as one of the earliest places where Zionist organizations emerged, in some ways, thanks to the work of this man on your left, Yosef Marco Baruch. Various Zionist driven sports and cultural organizations emerged across Bulgaria and other parts of the region. And depending on the country, Zionism was a decisive factor in the makeup of Jewish life. As we near World War II, obviously, the Holocaust dealt an enormous and tragic blow to most of the communities in the region. Um, what you see here is an example from the Holocaust, from the exhibit at the Jewish Museum in Sarajevo, dedicated to the Holocaust. And this book contains the names of the 12,000 Bosnian Jews who perished during the Holocaust. This plaque commemorates the 50,000 primarily Sephardic Jews from Thessaloniki, almost the entire community of Salonika or Thessaloniki was deported to Auschwitz in the summer of 1943. Bulgaria has a very interesting World War II history and a mixed record in the sense that all 50,000 Bulgarian Jews survived the Holocaust. They were ultimately protected by Bulgaria, let's say, and were not deported. However, Bulgaria did deport to Treblinka nearly 11,400 Jews from occupied territories in Yugoslav Macedonia and in northern Greece. What you see in front of you are the two monuments, one in Bulgaria's capital, Sofia, the other one along the promenade in Tel Aviv, commemorating symbolically these events, both the survival of all 50,000 Bulgarian Jews and the deportation of the Macedonian and Greek Jews from Bulgarian occupied territories. This person in front of you is probably the most important historical figure in Bulgaria, a politician by the name of Dimitar Peshev, who was instrumental in a last-minute intervention in March of 1943, which led to the cancellation of the orders to deport the first group of Bulgarian Jews. Following World War II, uh, in quite a few of these countries, significant numbers of the Jews who survived immigrated to the newly founded state of Israel. This is an example from Bulgaria. As we mentioned, all 50,000 Bulgarian Jews survived, and about 42,000 of those 50,000 immigrated en masse to Israel between 1948 and 1952. roughly. In Romania, where the Jewish population was very, very significant, in Greater Romania, in total about 800,000 Jews lived during World War II, roughly half of whom perished and the other half survived. Of the 380,000 or so who survived, uh, what followed after World War II was a very intriguing uh, and secret uh, deal through which hundreds of thousands of Romanian Jews were able to immigrate to Israel. And Israel essentially paid a ransom per capita, a set price per capita to the Romanian state so that Romanian Jews were able to immigrate. It's a fascinating and jarring story. And there is a lot of, there is an excellent book that discusses it, but essentially, nearly somewhere around 150,000 or more over the course of 4 decades immigrated through this um, monetary exchange between Israel and the communist government in Romania. I will stop here because this is the end of the first part of my presentation, the historical presentation. I want to see if there are any questions so far, and then we can speak about the different trips that visit these areas.
Thank you. And I recommend to everyone to stay because this will be the part where we can see beautiful images and have a little look at what these places look like and their communities look like. There are a few questions related to this section. Did Sephardic Jews create synagogues that look very Muslim? You showed synagogues that look like that.
That's an excellent question. Uh, and what is fascinating is that it was not Sephardic Jews who created these Muslim-looking synagogues. It was Ashkenazi Jews. As counterintuitive as this may sound, this is a very interesting development that happened in the mid-19th century, where mostly modern-minded German Jews, liberal, modern-minded German Jews, initiated a series of kind of reforms amongst their communities, one of which was the development of the so-called Neo-Moorish architectural style of these Muslim-looking Moorish synagogues that were built across Central Europe, mostly and primarily for Ashkenazi communities. The one, prominent exception is the Sephardic synagogue in Sofia, which is it's my home synagogue, so obviously the most beautiful one. It's a Sephardic synagogue built in this classical Neo-Moorish style, but designed by an Austrian architect.
Thank you. The next question was about Shabtai Tzvi, that you mentioned that he gave a date for the second coming. So what he meant by the first coming, perhaps himself, but if you just want to clarify that.
He meant that the auspicious year would be 1666, the year where the Messiah arrives and the Jews would move to Israel. That auspicious year would be 1666. I may have used the wrong term earlier.
Thank you. And I will read two more questions, and then we will continue to the virtual tour part. Was the tolerance of the Ottoman Empire toward Jews a total myth?
It was not. It was not a myth. Jews, depending on the particular century and metropolitan center that we're talking about, um, Jews were treated overall fairly well as a non-Muslim minority. There were one of several non-Muslim minorities in the Ottoman Empire. In different periods, there were also darker moments of relations between Muslims and Jewish communities. But what I was saying is that this most romanticized version of the friendly embrace of Jews as they arrived to the Ottoman Empire and the pronouncements that by the Sultan that that the king and queen in Spain were so foolish and this was a gift that was being sent to him. There is mythology and kind of myth making there, and part of it, as I was saying, was generated by the Jewish communities themselves. At that moment in the 1890s, they had a particular reason for doing it because they wanted to convince the Ottoman authorities to continue allowing Russian and Romanian Ashkenazi refugees to come to the Ottoman Empire as they were fleeing pogroms. Uh, there was some political motivation behind this emphasis suddenly in the 1890s, and remembering of the events of the 1490s as a benevolent moment where the Ottoman Empire was willing and ready to accept Jewish refugees, let's say.
Thank you. And the last question, were the Romani Jews in the Balkans during the Roman Empire, and how early is their presence?
Yes, the Romaniot Jews date back to the Roman Empire. Depending on the archaeological sites, organized communities were dated as early as the 1st century of the current era. Some places even a little bit earlier, but they coincided historically with the period of Roman rule in the eastern provinces of the Roman Empire. Ultimately, they became a Greek-speaking community, and when the Sephardic Jews arrived and encountered them, they called them El Gregos, the Greeks, because they spoke Greek.
Thank you. So we can continue with the tour.
All right, excellent. Thank you. And if there are more questions, we can see if we have time at the end. But I want to uh, tell you briefly about each of the different trips that we offer and how we combine countries in the area. Um, all of these trips we offer annually, right around the same time every year. Bosnia, Croatia, Slovenia, and Trieste in Italy is the trip that we offer in early May every year, and we've already announced the dates for May of 2026. 2025, the trip is already sold out, which is why I only list the dates of for 2026. We start in Sarajevo, and we have a Jewish and general tour of Sarajevo, and Sarajevo has very rich Sephardic and Ashkenazi history. These are images from Sarajevo. In Bosnia, we also stop at the tomb of Rabbi Moshe Danon, a fascinating figure in Bosnian Jewish history. Mostar in the Herzegovina part of Bosnia and Herzegovina is another stop along our route with its iconic bridge. We, of course, visit the National Museum in Sarajevo in order to see the Sarajevo Haggadah, an absolutely fascinating illuminated manuscript and with an intriguing history of survival. Then we move to Croatia. Dubrovnik in Croatia is what you see in front of you. The Dubrovnik Synagogue dates back to the 16th century. a fascinating building. This is Dubrovnik from afar, from a viewpoint up on a hill. Split, the second largest city in Croatia and the port town in Croatia, the port actually has interesting Jewish history because it was founded and built by a Portuguese Jew by the name of Daniel Rodriga in the 16th century. And we, of course, visit the synagogue in Split and much more. One of the highlights is Diocletian's palace. But here is the Split synagogue. This is the Jewish cemetery up on a hill overlooking the city in Split, and very interestingly shaped tombstones. Split by night or in the evening. We also take a day trip to the fascinating island of Hvar, where a lot of lavender is grown, and also some excellent wine is produced on that island in Hvar. The Plitvice Lakes, probably the best known natural park in Croatia. Zagreb, Croatia's capital, is another of our stops. The upper town in Zagreb. More images from Croatia's capital. Once we leave Croatia, we continue to Slovenia, where we visit the Lake Bled. This is what you see in front of you, and the Bled Castle. Ljubljana, Slovenia's capital, is our last hub before departure. It's a very beautiful city, one of my favorites. And while we're in Ljubljana, we also take a day trip to Trieste in Italy, which is not far away at all. And we visit the stunning synagogue in Trieste on your left, and we tour the city itself, which, as you can see on your right, has a very Austro-Hungarian look to it, despite being part of Italy today. Our next tour, chronologically, includes Romania, Serbia, and only a very brief visit in Szeged in Hungary. I apologize to Dora that we only have one night in Hungary, but Szeged is very beautiful. We start in Bucharest, sometimes known as Little Paris, and I think architecturally there is quite a bit of resemblance. There is very rich Jewish history and heritage in Bucharest and across Romania. The Coral Temple in Bucharest is one of three synagogues that we visit. This is the famous Bran Castle, or Dracula's Castle, where we make a stop. We also visit the Peles Castle, not far from Bran Castle. Elie Wiesel's hometown is the town of Szeged in northern Romania, on the border with western Ukraine, and this is Elie Wiesel's birthplace, which is a lovely museum today. That area in Romania is known as Maramuresh, of a picturesque rustic region where a lot of rural dwelling Jewish communities existed as well. Sighișoara, Dracula's birthplace, or Vlad Tepes's birthplace, is another stop along our route. Brasov, a fascinating town in Transylvania with a functioning synagogue, built actually by the same architect who built the synagogue in Szeged in Hungary. And speaking of which, this is the gorgeous and stunning synagogue in Szeged in Hungary, designed by the most prolific architect building synagogues in the region, Lipot Baumhorn, and this is definitely his masterpiece. Subotica in Serbia, in northwestern Serbia, is another very, very beautiful synagogue that we visit, and it was recently renovated. We tour the town of Subotica as well before we reach Belgrade, which is where that trip ends. Our next offering, which is a new tour, we launched it last summer, or this past summer, and next year will be the second iteration, is a trip that starts in Montenegro and covers Albania and the island of Corfu in Greece as well. You will notice that the dates for each of these trips are the same for 25 and 26, minus a day. You just need to subtract a day to get the exact dates for 26. But if you're interested, you can email me and I'll send you the exact tour dates for either of these 2 years, depending on when you want to travel. In Montenegro, we start in Kotor, which is absolutely spectacular and somewhat reminiscent of Dubrovnik, possibly, but it has its own unique sort of landscape in the Kotor Bay. After Montenegro, we continue to Albania. This is the town of Berat, a small town which is on UNESCO's list of World Heritage. And interestingly, there is a very tiny but fascinating Jewish museum in the town of Berat, which we visit. Girocastra is the second UNESCO World Heritage Site in southern Albania. We spend an overnight in Girocastra before we continue to Albania's port of Saranda, and from Saranda we take a speedboat to the island of Corfu. I don't think I have images from Corfu, but it's a very, very beautiful island. Next in our offerings is the annual tour of Bulgaria, my hometown, my home country, I should say, Bulgaria, North Macedonia, and Greece. This is Sophia's synagogue. This is the Neo-Moorish synagogue I mentioned, which, whose community is predominantly Sephardic. It was built in 1909 by an Austrian architect. This is the outside of the synagogue. More images from Sofia, the capital. The second largest city in Bulgaria is called Plovdiv, which has a very beautiful old town. And Plovdiv is also home to the only other active synagogue in Bulgaria besides the one in Sofia. It's the Zion or Zion synagogue from the 1890s, and a very, very lovely structure. And Plovdiv is also home to the second largest Jewish community in Bulgaria. The old town of Plovdiv, located on three conjoined hills. The building on your right is a fascinating ethnographic museum with a lovely exhibit of folk costumes and tools that were used in agriculture and city furniture and so on. Another image from Plovdiv. After Bulgaria, we continue to North Macedonia. Skopje is the capital of North Macedonia, and what you see in front of you is the Holocaust Museum, which chronicles the long history of Jewish presence in Macedonia, the vibrant Sephardic communities that lived in Macedonia, both in Skopje, in Bitola or Monastir, and actually a lot of descendants of families from Monastir live today in the States, in various parts of the US. After we visit the capital, Skopje, before we continue, this is the present-day synagogue located at the top floor of the Jewish community in Macedonia's capital, Skopje. Probably the pearl of North Macedonia, the most picturesque and most beautiful town in Macedonia is called Ohrid, located on the eponymous lake, on Lake Ohrid. And what one can see in the distance across the lake is Albania, because this is the western border of North Macedonia, and part of the lake is in Albanian territory. Uh, this is the Jovan Kaneo Church, probably the most photographed structure in Macedonia as a whole. It appeared multiple times on the National Geographic cover and on other publications. A very, very beautiful location. And here we also take a boat tour along the lake to see the beauty of the old town from a distance. Another image or a couple of images from Lake Ohrid and this Kaneo church. Then from North Macedonia, we continue to Thessaloniki in Greece. Before we reach Thessaloniki, we actually make a stop at a very beautiful and important archaeological site, which is the tomb of Philip II of Macedon. It was discovered in the 1970s and is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and quite fascinating to visit the actual tomb where he was buried and to see the gold treasures that were discovered in in Philip II of Macedon's tomb. This is Thessaloniki, as we mentioned earlier, a very important Jewish center and a majority Jewish town for quite a bit of its history. You can see the promenade, the famous White Tower. This is the only surviving synagogue in Thessaloniki from um, the pre-World War II period. It's from 1927, and it was built by families who moved from that town of Monastir or Bitula to Thessaloniki, and in the 1920s built that synagogue. It's the Aroesti family who erected it. The City by Night, once again, the White Tower. And finally, on a non-Jewish topic, we have one trip that doesn't have a Jewish focus, but rather it has a food and wine focus. This is a specialized food and wine tour only in Bulgaria, and we visit uh, most of the top-notch wineries, some small boutique wineries that produce wines from indigenous grapes. We also focus on local traditional Bulgarian food. We have some home visits where we participate in the preparation of traditional dishes with some very skilled home cooks. And then we have several gourmet, high-end meals cooked by two of the leading chefs in the country, so two of the most gifted chefs in the country. So if you are a wine aficionado or a foodie, this trip is for you. I recommend it. And as you see, chronologically, it takes place late June and early July. One of the wine regions that we visit is called Melnik in southwest Bulgaria. A few logistical clarifications. I'm sure some of you are wondering, for example, about Shabbat. On all of our Jewish themed trips, we do not travel on Shabbat. We spend Friday and Saturday at the same location. We do not use our bus on Shabbat. On all our trips, the touring is done by our own private bus. But again, on Shabbat, we cover everything on foot. We usually, depending on the trip, we either attend Kabbalat Shabbat services or hold our own mini Kabbalat Shabbat service for the group. On the Bulgarian-Greece tour in Thessaloniki, you have the option of attending morning Shabbat services at the synagogue in Thessaloniki. Kosher food. On our trips, we have 2 meals per day, which are included, breakfast and either lunch or dinner. And for all our lunches and dinners that we provide, for people who keep kosher, we offer vegetarian and fish dishes. And additionally, depending on the particular trip you're interested in, there are usually 1 or 2 opportunities per trip where you can have a proper kosher meal on your own, either at Chabad or at an actual kosher restaurant, again, depending on the tour. Our group size, our maximum group size is between 25 and 27 participants. Some trips sell out, others may have a smaller number, but at the very most, you will be traveling with in a group of 27. The activity level is moderate, I would say. Our guidance is that if you do not have significant difficulty walking, you will do just fine on our trips. If you do have significant difficulty walking, then possibly our trips may not be suitable. We stay at top-notch hotels on all our tours, mostly 4 and 5 star hotels, centrally located. We try to pick the best option in each of the cities where we stay, or one of 2 best options. One example I will give you, and I'll disclose a secret here. In Dubrovnik, on the tour in Dubrovnik, I sort of make a point of making sure I'm always with the group on the tour because this is one of my all-time favorite hotels. It's called Hotel More. As you can see, beautifully located, overlooking a bay, just not in the old town, but not that far from the old town. Just one example, but I would say all our accommodations are quite spectacular and have unique charm. Uh, this is our website, sephardicbalkans.com. I know that Dora and Sebastian will also share these logistical details in a follow-up email. You can email me if you have any questions, and I'm happy to provide detailed itineraries for any of the trips or answer additional questions. And yeah, that was my last slide. I'll stop here.
Thank you so much, Joseph. Thank you for showing us around and letting us know about your trips. I will read some questions that came in. What is the state of Jewish life now in the Balkans? How large are these communities? And I'll just add a follow-up question to that as well. Like, do you meet any of the communities during these trips?
That's an excellent question. Absolutely. We make a point of truly interacting with the communities, meeting both professional leaders of the communities and just lay members. And this happens both in organized meetings and in many cases informally when we are at a synagogue, people, strike up conversations. Many people have made friendships that have lasted well past the trip. So absolutely, we make a point of interacting with community members. We invite people to join us during dinner or lunch or as part of a city tour. Sometimes the city tour is guided for the Jewish part by a member of the local community. In terms of numbers, obviously, they differ and vary based on the country and the community we're talking about. In Bulgaria, for example, currently there are roughly 3,500, possibly 4,000 members of the community, most of them located in the capital, Sofia, and then the second largest community we mentioned is in Plovdiv, and there are small pockets in other regional towns. Um, in North Macedonia, tragically, uh, almost the whole community perished. There is a tiny but vibrant community today in the capital, which numbers about 100, 100 members roughly. Uh, in Romania, there are probably anywhere between 6 to 9,000 Jews living in Romania. Uh, in Bosnia, the community is somewhere under 1,000, somewhere between 600 to 1,000, most of them in Sarajevo, and so forth. So the numbers differ, but we always get accurate and much more accurate information than what I'm giving you now from the leaders of the communities with whom we meet.
Thank you. Logistical question. How many times do travelers change hotels on each tour?
Uh, on the Bosnia, Croatia, Slovenia tour, I'm proud to say that we were able to design it in such a way that there are no single night stays. On that trip, we always stay either 2 or 3 nights in each location. On the other tours, it's primarily 2 nights per location, per city. And in some places, we have one night stays interspersed between the 2 night stops. So it varies. It varies depending on the trip, but I'm happy to send you the detailed itinerary for a tour you're interested in, and you will see the overnights listed. Our guiding principle, you may have seen on the maps, we try to cover uh, most of the important highlights, both in terms of Jewish history and also in terms of general history, culture, architecture, uh, which is why we travel between locations and rather than, let's say, doing more day trips from a single hub because you cover less that way. But we avoid single night stays as much as possible.
Thank you. Um, Sorry, I'm trying to see this question. Why do you not travel to Albania? I think you do travel to Albania. So Rachel
Yes,
will
yes.
send you the itinerary of, I mean, we will send out to everyone, of course, the website of Joseph and also the email address of Joseph. You will be able to take a look at.
Albania is part of the Montenegro, Albania, and Corfu tour, and Albania is actually the most important part of that trip. We spend the the largest amount of time in Albania between the three locations. Yeah.
Thank you. So as I was saying, you will receive all this information tomorrow. Have you encountered any anti-Semitism on the tours? Where are most participants from? And do you do tours of Israel? Okay, these are three separate questions. We
Yes,
can
yes.
start with
So
the did you encounter anti-Semitism on the
we
tours?
we do not offer tours to Israel. I obviously, travel to Israel privately, personally. I have family in Israel, but at this point, we don't offer tours to Israel, even though I've thought about it. We have not encountered anti-Semitism. I'm happy and I'm very happy and pleased to say. Um, in fact, on quite a few of these tours, we talk about important historical moments where the opposite was true. Uh, Non-Jewish neighbors either protecting Jews, supporting the Jewish community in Bulgaria. We speak about this a lot as we dive in depth into what took place in the 1940s in Bulgaria and how ultimately all of Bulgaria's Jews survived. In Bosnia, there are fascinating stories of local Muslims protecting their Jewish neighbors, saving Jews from uh, from the death camps essentially, and most of these local Muslims were recognized by Yad Vashem as righteous among the nations. The same is true in Albania. In Albania, too, we talk about primarily Albanian Muslims and some Albanian Christians who were brave and valiant and instrumental in protecting both Albanian Jews and also foreign Jews who had arrived to Albania from Macedonia and from elsewhere. And we actually meet the descendants of those Albanian righteous among the nations. And those descendants are extremely proud of what their parents or grandparents did during World War II. And it's very moving. These meetings, especially in Albania, are extremely moving, and they were a highlight, I would say, of our trip there this past summer.
Thank you. And where are most participants from?
Most participants are American from all over the US. Occasionally, we have people joining us from Israel, from the United Kingdom. We've had some travelers from Canada. But by and large, it's primarily American travelers from all over the US.
Thank you. I don't see now more questions, but if anyone still feels like asking something, please put them in the chat. And in the meantime, there was just one more question from the historical part that I skipped. It was just asking for the book that you recommended about Romania. Just at the very end, you said that there is a very interesting book.
Yes, it's called The Ransom of the Jews. And I can send you the title, Dora, so you can share it in the
Mhm.
follow-up. But it's called The Ransom of the Jews, and the author's last name is Ioannid.
Great.
Radu Ioannid. I'm putting it in the chat here. But
Mhm.
the title is The Ransom of the Jews.
Great. Thank you. So I think maybe you answered everything. Now I don't see more, but of course all of you will receive Joseph's email address. So if you have more questions about the trips that you'd like to discuss with him, please feel free to get in touch.
If you have any friends who they don't need to be Jewish, if they're interested in food and wine and travel on such specialized food and wine tours, please let them know about our non-Jewish offering as well.
Thank you. And one more question came in the meantime. How vibrant is the Jewish community in Sofia, and which is the trip that focuses on Bulgaria?
The
If you can
community is
maybe.
extremely vibrant, very active, and the tour is the trip that takes place in June, in mid-June, Bulgaria, North Macedonia, and Thessaloniki in Greece. So in 2025, the dates are June 9th through the 20th, 2025. And then in 26, the dates will be almost exactly the same.
Great, thank you so much. So, for example, in Sofia, do you have a Kabbalat Shabbat in with the community, or how do they?
We meet the community. Kabbalat Shabbat is in Salonika, in Thessaloniki. In Sofia, we are in the middle of the week, but we meet with the community both at the synagogue and at the Jewish Community Center as well.
Great,
If yeah,
thank you. And thank you, Jake, for putting in the link for the trips. Of course, we will send it out as well. But if someone already wants to go and check the trips online, Jake just put in the link to the website, so you can just click on the Zoom chat and it will open up. But it's sephardicbalkans.com, where you find all the detailed information about every single trip. So you can feel free to check. So let me just take a quick look again. Okay, I think we have no more questions. Jake, beautiful picture again with Salonika this time. And actually, I'll just let all of you know that we have a talk coming up about Jewish Salonika in specific on December 29. So those of you who want to dig deeper into the history of this specific city, you will have a chance with a different Joseph, who is from Greece. Joseph Vardakis will be our speaker, and he will share with us about Jewish Salonika. And our next event, which is going to be on Thursday, I'll just let you know also about that. It's called the Jews of the Commonwealth, which is the Commonwealth of Nations. And it mostly includes very, very small, very isolated communities. We will specifically explore the Cayman Islands, Cyprus, Nigeria, Sri Lanka, and also New Zealand in this talk, which is very interesting that all these communities are actually connected through the Commonwealth. So we hope you can join us for this. And as always, tomorrow we'll be in touch with you with the further details and links. And we hope some of you will decide to join Joseph on one of these trips. So thank you, Joseph, for the wonderful presentation.
thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dora. Thank you, everyone. Bye bye. Have a good evening.
Bye. Bye, everyone. Thank you for joining.